So we just wrapped up our episode about postpartum depression, and I want to encourage you to listen to the entire podcast. We really talked about a lot of different ways that you can help as a husband, as a friend, as a family member, and also as a new mom help them help you, let's say. So, whether it doesn't matter what season of life you're in right now, I truly think this is something that you could, learn from and also help us deliver better content to you in the future with. So, yeah, anything you want to share in specific about this episode? I actually enjoyed it in a way that I think it will be just a help to people. And I was a little leery about it, to be honest,
Yeah.
before we started. So,
Yeah, I mean, we share a lot of like our experience with postpartum depression in this
mhm.
episode. And so it is a little bit of a hard subject to talk about,
It
but
is. Yeah.
I think that you touched on it in this episode is that it is a bit of a ministry now, having gone through it 3 out of 4
Yeah. Yep.
pregnancies. We hope that this episode is an encouragement to those
Yes.
who listen to it.
Yeah. So, yeah, we hope that you join us throughout the entire episode. Love to hear from you. So sit back and enjoy. What started as a Saturday morning coffee date turned into a podcast where we chat about things like faith, family, finances, and so much more.
We're just a husband and wife living this devoted life, and we're here to help you live this devoted life too.
If you enjoy this podcast and want to help support our ministry, there are a few things you can do.
Please subscribe to this podcast, leave us a review, and share these episodes with your friends so that you can help them live this devoted life too.
Hey everyone, we are back from our Florida trip. It's fresh off of a fun family vacation down south, and if you saw our last episode, we actually recorded it down there. So if you haven't seen it, go back and check it out. But yeah, it was a great trip.
Yeah, it really was. It's just a really good time for us to get away as a family, to make memories. The kids look forward to it. It's now been the 3rd year that we've done it.
Yeah,
Michigan winters are brutal.
they
And
definitely
so-
get long.
Yeah. And so, that was actually something that you did for me 3 years ago, is you were like, I think you need to get out of here and
Yeah.
go down to Florida.
Get some sunshine.
Yeah, get some D3 and just kind of, I don't know, get us through that last long bit of winter, you know?
Yeah. Usually by the end of February into March in Michigan, again, it's not that we don't ever get sunny days, but it's just a lot of gray and a lot of cold. And I mean, obviously, we're very thankful that we're able to do it. Not everyone can get away, so we're very thankful and blessed to be able to do it. But yeah, we
Yeah.
make it a priority now.
I know, and now the kids like really look forward to it, and I mean we do too. It's just, once again making good family memories, and
Yeah, totally.
yeah, so
So we actually have a different kind of switched gears on our plan for the podcast. We were planning on getting into some series, parenting and marriage and things like that. But we had a very specific request from a community member to talk about postpartum depression and specifically, some parts specifically about how the husband can be of help during this time. So
yeah.
we thought, man, that's a good topic. We have, unfortunately, a lot of experience in it. So we thought we would kind of start with this after our introductory podcasts and just kind of do a one-off here.
Yeah, I mean, we've had 4 kids, and 3 out of the 4 kids, I had postpartum depression. I don't even think I knew that I had it with
Yeah.
the first 2, but looking back now, I know that I for sure did. And I mean, I'll share the story after our 3rd, but I mean, that
Yeah.
was a really, really dark season,
Yeah.
after our 3rd. And so we're hoping that by sharing this, that it is an encouragement to those who are listening, that it is just a season that you go through, and encouraging you to, communicate with each other, to seek help when you need it,
Mhm.
and just to show each other a lot of grace in that season. And so, we're not doctors, we're not licensed professionals,
Yeah.
we're just sharing our experience.
Disclaimer alert.
Yes.
Disclaimer, yeah.
Disclaimers. We are not professionals in this, but we do hope that by sharing the journey that we went on, I think we've said this before, like everyone's journey is
Mhm.
unique. Everyone's journey is going to be different. And postpartum depression can take on so many different forms. That it's going to look different for every person. But I'm hoping that by sharing what we have walked through,
Mhm.
that it can encourage and that it can maybe help people identify and maybe seek help earlier in whatever form they're needing to seek help. Because once again, everyone's journey is so unique that it can be different what everyone's needs are
Yeah, it's
within
very
that.
different, but there are a lot of commonalities
Yeah.
across, no matter who you are. And I think also as a husband and father, I was caught off guard, and so hopefully some awareness on this topic can just help you prepare a little better. I mean, you're never going to be fully prepared for it, until the moment arrives per se, and you just take it a day at a time.
Mhm.
But I was definitely very unprepared and was therefore kind of not very helpful at times.
Yeah,
So
it's funny because I think when we got married, like I was very even keeled. Like I was not one who was
very
prone
much
to
so.
like big mood swings. I didn't have high highs and I didn't have high lows. And so I think you and I were both caught off guard
Yeah.
after our son was born, who was our oldest. Like I, I remember the nurse calling me because after you have a baby, they usually call you about a week later, and they're
Hmm.
like, "How are you doing?" Just kind of that follow up to make sure that you're doing okay. And I remember telling her like, "Well, I've been crying quite a bit, but that's normal, right?" And she was like, "Yeah, that's very normal." And I was like, "I'm just not used to this roller coaster of emotions." Like,
Hmm.
our son, with your first, you lay all these plans, right? I had this birth plan that I was planning on sticking to. Well, then he ended up being transverse and he was not moving. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
he was transverse for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And by the time like the due date was approaching, he wasn't moving. Now he was just like breech with like a leg and a
Like
knee
moving
and
into position. Yeah, he
yeah,
was
moving into
not.
position.
Yeah.
He
Yep.
was, I mean, we were literally like going to pools trying to like
Oh yeah.
swim.
We tried it
I
all.
was I was laying on an ironing board. Like it was literally upside down on a couch and I was
Yeah.
laying with like my feet over my head trying to get him to turn around like, "Hey, like gravity this way."
Hmm.
And he didn't move. So I ended up having a C-section with him and when you have a traumatic birth, that actually is something that can spark postpartum depression, which
Yep.
I didn't know that. I mean, you're already dealing with all kinds of crazy hormones, And, so when I was talking with this nurse and I was like, "I'm crying quite a bit," she was like, "That's normal."
Yeah.
There is something called baby blues where it is
Hmm.
very normal to experience some sadness, to experience some hormone shifts. We actually looked up like what some of the symptoms are of baby blues.
Yeah, so some of the symptoms in specific are mood swings, anxiety, sadness, irritability, feeling overwhelmed, crying, reduced concentration, appetite problems, trouble sleeping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like a lot of those things are normal. It's just when they go beyond what's normal. So for my son, it started off with that traumatic birth, which can be a trigger for postpartum depression.
Hmm.
First time mom, like my life has completely changed. I mean, he did not sleep like for the first like year of his life. He
Yeah.
just didn't sleep. Like I
He
remember
still doesn't
he
sleep, and
still
he's 10
doesn't
years
sleep.
old.
Well, I
Yeah.
remember Googling because I was like, I thought newborns slept. And it was like, yeah, your newborn should be sleeping like 20 plus
Hmm.
hours. Mine was sleeping like 14 and
Yeah.
he wasn't tired. He just was awake. And I
Yeah.
thought it was very odd. And he was not a good napper. And so I was getting very little sleep.
Yeah,
He was
by the
sleeping.
way, I'll interject. I don't know how parents made it before the internet and Google. There are pros and cons, like you just said.
Yeah,
It was like sometimes it causes concern, but it is a little nice to have that reference tool.
definitely. So like was not getting much sleep. And I was the type of person who I just put my all into, I mean, I put my all into everything that I
Yeah.
do. I was not taking any breaks for myself. I thought I was being very selfless and just giving 100%, but really it was actually not as good for
Yeah.
our family
Yeah.
because I was just downright exhausted.
Yeah.
So I remember being, 6, 9 months in, and you were out mowing the lawn. And you came in and I was sitting there nursing him and I literally am sobbing. And you were like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "I just want to mow the lawn." Like you probably would have thought, like, think I was just like crazy, but
Yeah. We had a few moments
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
But I mean, that was 6, 9 months in. I was still experiencing quite a bit of depression.
hmm And like she said, prior to all of this time in our life, she didn't have those episodes and she didn't have the major hormone swings. And so it really caught me off guard. And then, as a young father, right, you go from it's kind of how the firstborn feels after the secondborn comes along, all that attention goes, or the attention is split, right? So as a father and husband, you go from having all the attention of the wife to very split, and honestly, the pendulum really swings. So, I think as men, we're kind of going through a transitional period at least
Right.
with all of that. So, and then all of a sudden, it's like, wow, who is this person
Yeah.
that I'm looking at and interacting with? And you can't help, it's a very helpless feeling.
Mm.
So like all of those things are normal, but those are the things that are challenging to overcome.
Yeah, I mean, and then you add postpartum depression into
Right?
it, and
Yeah.
it's even a bigger adjustment because now not only are you adjusting to having a new child, but now you're having to support a wife who hormonally, physically, everything is just not
Yeah.
herself,
Exactly.
you know?
Yep.
It is funny. I'm gonna share this story, I guess. I don't know if this was like postpartum depression or not, but it just was like that new mom moment. Like I got home from the hospital and everyone wanted to come over and see the new baby. It was the
hmm
first baby in the family for quite a few years.
Yeah.
And, my best friend and her husband were there. Your whole family came over, and I don't remember if my parents were there or
I
not.
don't know.
But I hadn't been home for more than just a couple hours. And we had like 10 people in our house. Like it was a lot of people. And everyone's passing the baby around and, oogling over in him. And I'm like, I just want to hold my baby. So I
Yeah.
go and I take him and I nurse him. And once I was done nursing, your dad actually walked over and scooped him up and said, "My turn." And I was like gutted. I was like, he stole my baby.
Yeah.
And I just was like, this is not rational. Like I literally felt like someone had come and kidnapped our child. And so I stepped out of the room for a minute. I
And meanwhile, no one has any idea that
no,
she's feeling like
no.
this.
Yeah, I stepped out of the room and I
Yeah.
came back in and I looked around and I literally went, there are way too many people in my house. And so I just said, I'm going to go take a shower. So I walked into the bathroom and I literally stood in the shower and sobbed. This is not logical. This is not logical out loud. Like out loud. I was trying to speak truth to
Yeah.
myself. Like, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I know this isn't right and this is not logical. And so
hmm
like there is just so many hormones at play from having a baby,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
then sometimes your body just doesn't know what to do and those hormones stay just way off kilter and
hmm
it can last a lot longer. After our second was born, she was another very traumatic birth. Thankfully, I was able to do a VBAC,
hmm
but she was sunny side up and she had her hand over her head. It was like 32 hours of labor and 4 hours of active pushing.
Yeah,
Like,
it was honestly, I half jokingly, but kind of seriously, say it was one of the worst days of my life, and because it was very unnerving and kind of scary at times. It was a pretty new doctor. He was like third stringer
yeah,
because
I had
you're
never met him until that moment.
yeah, like your main OB wasn't available, and then the backup wasn't available,
We got the
and
backup's backup.
yeah,
Yeah.
so literally, and He was again, he did a phenomenal job. I'm not discrediting him or anything, but there were several times he actually went out into the hallway and called someone. And I mean, again, I don't know what he was doing, but I'm somewhat certain that he was calling to get advice,
Well,
and
after one of the calls, which
yeah,
I'm glad I did not know about the calls till afterwards, he
yeah,
came back in and he actually like pinched our daughter's fingers. And I literally felt her go thump and
hmm,
pull her hand
yeah.
back up. And he was like, well, okay, you can birth her now. Cause he was talking, doing another
Yeah,
C
we were gonna do an
section.
emergency
Yeah.
C-section. The previous one was
And I
planned,
was
but
adamant that
yeah,
I wanted that VBAC.
yeah.
And so, after she was born, there was a lot just with that birth.
Mhm.
I did not connect with her for a solid week. Like maybe even more. It was one of those things where it was probably more a little subconscious. I thought she hurt me. Like it was really bad. And that whole transition from 1 to 2, like my baby was no longer my baby. He was the big boy. I
Mhm.
had 3 years with him after all kinds of infertility and stuff that we had, which we'll have to talk about that in an
Yes,
upcoming episode
yeah,
too.
yep.
Um, I was having a hard time connecting with her.
Yeah,
And
yep.
I remember one day I was sitting on the couch and my mom worked for a tax consultant at the time. And so like, of course, all of our births just happened to be during tax season. And so she was never able to come other than just to like come up and see the baby and then leave,
It's because we planned them not to be during hunting season, so
True, true.
at least
Um,
try to.
But anyways, I remember
Yep,
sitting on the couch and I hear a knock at the door and I go and answer. My mom's standing there, which they don't live near us.
right,
They're
yeah, a
like
couple hours away,
about two
yeah,
hours away. And I was
yep.
like, what are you doing here? And she said, well, James texted me and he said that my daughter needed her mom.
Mhm.
And so like I still like I could not have loved you more in that moment.
Yeah,
Just you saw the need that I didn't even know how to like say that I
yeah.
needed it.
Yeah, and that's one thing. We're in these podcasts. We're trying to tell more stories and connect and hopefully just you can pick up different things. It's not like we're always going to go down through a list, but I would say that is one of the things from a husband uh, point of view that I would encourage you to try is to involve the family, involve the community, because again, it can be overwhelming for both the husband and wife. And so if you can identify those things and seek out help, yeah, again, in this case, it wasn't professional help. It
No.
was just a mother coming to see her daughter
And
and
I
give
didn't
that.
even know
Yeah,
how to help myself,
right.
in
Yeah.
that moment. And so like I had some postpartum depression with her too, just from
Hmm.
the traumatic birth. But postpartum depression can manifest itself in so many different ways. I'm actually going to
Yeah.
have you read the list because I think the Mayo Clinic has a good list of
They
signs to
do.
look for.
Yep. So, a depressed mood or severe mood swings, crying too much. So again, it's beyond those baby blues type of level of crying. Difficulty bonding with your baby, which you
Mhm.
touched on, withdrawing from family and friends, loss of appetite or eating much more than usual. So both ends of the spectrum there. Inability to sleep, insomnia, yes, or sleeping too much, overwhelming tiredness or loss of energy, less interest and pleasure in activities you used to enjoy, intense irritability or anger, fear that you're not a good mother, hopelessness, feeling of worthlessness, shame, guilt, or inadequacy, reduced ability to think clearly, concentrate, or make decisions, restlessness, severe anxiety and panic attacks, thoughts of harming yourself or your baby, and recurring thoughts of death or suicide.
Yeah.
And again, many women, maybe who have had multiple pregnancies and births, that may have experienced some of these things. These might be obvious to you, but again, from a husband perspective, they might not be as
Right.
obvious. And so these are definitely things to look for. And I don't think they intended them to be listed in order of severity per se, but obviously some of those are very severe, and that those are definitely times to seek professional help. And again, I wasn't minimizing the professional help when I mentioned, involving the family and the community. I was just saying that, there's multiple avenues to help and to just help your wife and your family overcome these things. And us sharing our stories, we're not trying to say we've had the worst experiences or anything. I mean, you might be experiencing things that we've never even come close to experiencing. And those are definitely times to make sure you make it a priority to get help and to, work together to overcome them.
Yeah. And, coming from, just the perspective of like, why are we sharing this? Like, how can the man help the woman through this?
Yes. Yeah.
It's just bringing an awareness of things to look for. You had no experience with that, and neither did I. But had we been a little more aware, you may have noticed things.
Very,
Because
yeah,
I
very
wasn't even
much.
noticing them in myself.
Right.
Sometimes just having an outside perspective can be eye opening too. Like, hey, babe, like, I really see that you're struggling right now
Hmm.
in X, Y, and Z,
Yeah,
like,
because it's relentless. I mean, you literally can't, remove yourself from the
mhm.
situation. I mean, you're always dealing with it.
Yeah. The one thing on that list, and I'm going to share this, it's not talked about very often, but that intense anger and irritability, I don't think is talked about very much, but that is what I experienced with our third. And I mean, there is a very real postpartum rage that can happen. When I was pregnant with our third, you had a very serious, like life-threatening surgery.
Hmm.
He had a
Yeah.
mass growing in the center of his ear. It was called a cholesteatoma,
Hmm.
but most cholesteatomas are caught early. His was not. Like it had literally disintegrated everything in the center of his ear and had
Yeah.
eaten into your skull.
Yeah, literally, like literally right now, sitting here, I have a hole in my skull that I have to go to the University of Michigan to get checked twice a year, and to make sure it's not herniating into my middle ear, which actually is gone now. So basically, herniate out of my head. So
Yeah.
sounds pretty crazy, but I'm very thankful. I had lots of great follow-ups, and everything's good right now.
Yeah.
But yes,
So that happened right
major,
before
yeah,
our baby was born. And then just a couple months in, his mom passed away very
yeah,
unexpectedly. Then your grandma passed away. Then my grandpa passed away, all within 2 weeks, like 2 week increments of
yeah.
each
We're
other.
literally talking February surgery, April birth of Cora, July death of my mom, still July death for my grandma,
In
and then
early August for my grandpa, I
yeah,
believe it was.
yeah,
It was like a
yeah.
2 week increments.
And then your dad got diagnosed with
And then my
cancer,
dad got
prostate cancer.
diagnosed with prostate cancer. So,
Yeah,
like, all of a sudden, we were just bombarded with
yeah.
all of this heaviness. And I experienced very severe postpartum depression after our third, like
Mhm,
very severe. You were grieving the loss of your mom,
mhm.
and I was dealing with all of these hormones. Like, I remember standing there and I could feel the rage swell from the tips of my toes to the ends of my hair. Like it felt like it was standing on end.
Mhm.
And I realized in that moment that that blind with rage is a very apt saying.
Yeah.
Like I could feel it coming, but I felt powerless to control it.
Yeah.
It was a very hard season, and it's hard as a Christian to talk about that, I think,
Mhm.
because you feel like you should not struggle with
Right.
that,
Yeah.
and that
Yep.
is something that I truly struggled. I I remember one night standing in the kitchen. I had made dinner for you guys. I had set it on the table. You walked in the door, and I was standing in the kitchen eating, even though the kids were at the table eating, and I was like, your dinner is there. And I was standing in the kitchen just sobbing. And you're kind of like looking at me like, are you okay? And I was like, I am going out tonight. And I said,
Mhm.
I need to leave. And so I remember kissing you all on the top of the head and saying, I might be back. And I walked out the door.
Mhm.
Now, I wasn't actually planning on leaving,
Yeah,
but
and I didn't feel like it was. I didn't have any fear of her, like, literally not coming back. I just knew that was her way of saying, like, "I really need a break, and this is serious."
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just to be able to say that I might be back, I felt like that was like a little bit of like a power. Like I have the ability to choose right now, which is so silly, like looking back on it. But
Mhm.
in that moment, I was like, I am not okay and I need to leave like now. And I remember he texted me and he was like, I love you. And I didn't respond. Then you text me again. You're like, where'd you go? And I'm like, I'm walking around Joanne Fabrics sobbing right now. And I was just like, I
Yeah.
am not okay. And I mean, this was like 9 months postpartum at
Yeah.
this point.
Yeah.
You went on a big hunting trip, which was therapeutic to your soul
Yeah,
after
it was
losing your mom.
very healing. It was, like, almost spiritual. I literally spent 6 days on a backpack hunt in the middle of the Chugach Mountains of Alaska, and, just incredible experience, and, with some great people as well, and,
Which was
yeah.
all planned before having the baby.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not like you were like, hey, peace out,
No, yeah, I
like,
mean, you have to actually like I got the tag for or applied for the tag for it in the December before, so all of these things happened after I actually, got the tag and whatnot. And we talked about it actually for a while
yeah.
about, maybe not even going, but it takes years and years to get this tag actually. So you were, on board 100%, with me going. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was
It was not a welcome reception
no,
when you walked back in the door, I guess.
yeah.
He had taken a red eye. Can I share this?
Go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah.
are you sure? Okay.
Yeah.
He walked in the door after, being gone for 6, 7 days,
Mhm.
whatever it was, and you had taken a red eye. And in all fairness, like you'd been up for like well
Yeah.
over 24 hours. And
And it's
he,
a 4-hour time difference,
yeah.
between Alaska and here,
Oh, you can
so
sugarcoat it all you want. But he walks in the door and he says, man, I'm tired. I need to take a nap. And I'm like, must be nice, and it all went downhill from there. By the
Mhm.
time he got up from a nap, I am just like standing in the kitchen, just fuming. And he was like, what, did you not get a nap either? And I was like, no, I did not get a nap, and I just
Because
like,
that was the plan is we were actually both going to take a
yes.
nap, at,
It's
different
like the baby didn't
yeah.
sleep. And I just, yeah. So that was all like during the postpartum depression and the
Yeah.
postpartum rage. And just like, it was
Thankful to be able to laugh about it now,
yes, yeah.
yeah.
So like we
Yeah.
share all of these stories and we're just touching on the iceberg of all that we actually went through
Yeah,
with this,
yep.
but we share this just because we want to be able to help you identify postpartum depression because it can take on so many varying forms and there are so many
Yep.
different triggers for it
Honestly,
and
it's the toughest part. And it won't feel like it's the toughest part because once you do identify it, then you have to deal with it and you have to support each other through it and to just endure. A lot of it is
Mhm.
just waking up every day and enduring. And so it won't feel like the toughest part, but once you do identify and start working on it together, and again, I can't emphasize enough together. This is not just her problem or her burden to bear. It truly is, a burden that you have to bear as a married couple, and it's something that we, again, are on the other side of, thankfully. And we're very grateful. I
Mhm.
think, honestly, in many respects, it's brought us closer together.
Mhm.
It's helped teach me, train me to at least try to be a better husband, even today. And also, it's given us somewhat of a better way to minister to other people around us.
Mhm.
And I mean, again, we don't know who all will hear this. If it just reaches one person that it can help, we're very grateful to be able to share it. But if let's say you might be a grandma or a grandpa, and think maybe this is something that your child or even grandchild needs to hear, depending on how old they are, or an aunt or uncle, or just a friend, or maybe you're a 20-year-old that isn't married and isn't even close to dealing with some of this stuff, but you might have another friend that is. Definitely
Mhm.
share it, and again, just kind of that awareness beforehand. I think it at least would have helped me a
Mhm.
lot, and just to know that it's something that is very common,
Yeah.
and something that to have to deal with.
Well, I think too, like, as a man, and I don't know if all men are like this, but just my experience with you
Hmm.
is you want to fix everything.
Everything,
And
yeah,
so,
yep,
like, with this, there was nothing to fix.
right,
And so, just knowing what you could do to support, which kind of leads us into just the next thing is, first is just learn how to identify it.
yep,
And the second is to communicate through it
yep,
because you don't know what I need unless I communicate that with you.
yep,
And you might notice something that's going on that I don't even notice because I'm just in the thick of caring for a newborn.
right,
And you're like, hey, like, I think you might be struggling with some things. Like, can we talk about this? Like, what can I do to support you more in this? Like,
yes,
are there
yep,
things that I can do that will take some of the burden off of you? You can even say, like, is there something that I'm doing
hmm,
that is adding to your stress?
right, yeah,
Like, is it the way that I'm communicating? Is it something I'm doing?
yeah,
Like,
or not communicating,
yeah.
and yeah,
So this was like a Saturday morning coffee date that turned into a podcast. So communication is just going to be a very central theme to
yes, very
this,
much so.
And so if you can take anything away from this, it's just be sure to communicate through it.
Yeah, you'll hear the word communicate probably in every podcast because it truly is so integral and important to marriage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And
You
parenting and everything in life.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
And then I guess that leads us into our final thing. We talked about how to identify it. We talked about being sure to communicate, which I think we touched on throughout this whole episode. But,
Yep.
um, the third thing was, so with our fourth, having had all of these experiences with postpartum depression,
Hmm.
I wanted to be very proactive,
Yes.
going into
Yeah. Before giving birth.
before
Yep.
giving birth. So
Yes. Yep.
I knew I struggled with this.
Yep.
And, you know, if you have a history of postpartum depression, you actually are more likely to have it again.
Yep.
And, whether you have one kid or you have 10 kids, postpartum depression can hit at any time. It says
Hmm.
that 1 in 7 women experience postpartum depression, which
Yep.
is a lot. Um, and so being proactive, I think, once again, communicating. So going into having our fourth, I wanted to make sure that I was geared up both physically,
Yep.
spiritually, mentally. And so I started making some small changes during pregnancy once we found out we were pregnant, like
Hmm.
very unexpectedly, actually. um,
Yeah.
yeah, well, we wanted a baby,
It was
but
expected, and then hope to not be expected, and then and then surprised. But yeah.
yes, yeah. Because that's a story for another day.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yep.
I just made some small changes physically that I knew would help support hormones and would just be something that would
Mhm.
help me physically.
Yep.
Making small routine changes, started taking different supplements and whatever,
Mhm.
to help bolster, just me physically.
Yeah, try to identify those triggers that
Yeah.
cause the episodes, if you will. Yeah,
Yeah,
yep.
like at least the hormone side of it.
Yeah.
But then, I also wanted to make sure I was geared up spiritually.
Mhm.
And so I was just making sure that I was just saturating myself in God's word because God does give us the help and the
Mhm.
Spirit He is our helper and He's
Yes.
going to help us through it. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't seek outside help.
Mhm.
It just, that gives you like everything that you need, and
Mhm.
and he'll give you discernment of when to seek
Yeah, it'll
help.
make you well defended.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you for
Yeah.
putting into words what I was like trying to say there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so just like making sure that spiritually I was nourishing my soul. So I was like trying to nourish my body, I was trying to nourish my soul, and then identifying triggers, I think, is a huge thing. So
Yep.
for me, I noticed that a lot of my triggers was my house.
Yeah.
Like you already have like the chaos of like kids,
Yep.
and then we're adding another one. kids are
Yeah,
messy.
we had
Like
a
that's
dog at the
just, we had a
time.
dog
Yep,
at the
yep,
time. Like there
yep,
was dog hair everywhere.
yep,
And just like, there was just, the house is something that triggers me.
yeah.
I was able to identify it. There's actually a book called Triggers, which
Mhm.
I think is a really good one to read because it gives you very practical steps to, just identify some things that may trigger you and that you can then be proactive.
Right.
And so the house was one of them for me. And so I communicated that with you prior to, and
Yep.
I just said, I hate to spend the money to hire somebody, but it took 4 kids. It took four
Yeah.
kids for me to realize I can't do this all on my own. Like, I don't got this.
Yeah. Yep.
um, yeah, God definitely uses kids to sanctify me and make me
Mhm.
realize that I
Yeah.
don't have this. But so we saw outside help, like hired, I think it was your aunt at the time,
Mhm.
to come and clean for me, just like the deep clean stuff. Like she did the showers, the toilets, the floors, like that kind of stuff.
Yep.
It just was a moment for me to go, okay, she's got this.
Yeah,
Like,
and
I don't have to have this.
yeah, and I'm not saying like this is all my doing or thinking or whatever, but I am the type of person that, again, like she said earlier, I want to try to fix things all the time, and to a fault, a lot of times. But in situations like this, I think if I remember correctly, um, when you would get overwhelmed, I'd be like, all right, what are your main pain points? And you would say, this, that, and it was one was cleaning. Okay, well, let's hire a cleaning person. And again, it wasn't that I wasn't helping out or, pitching in, or that's like, just, something that she takes care of. It wasn't that at all. It was, I have a very demanding, high stress, and involved day job. And so we, again, are thankful that we were able to hire that out.
Mhm.
But instead of distract me from my job, my, income generating job, we thought, hey, that's something that we can hire out and make that just a check the box. This isn't as much of a pain point anymore. Loading the kids into the vehicle and going and getting groceries. Again, we don't want to make it sound like, oh, well, we can't do this or whatever, because it's like literally billions of people every day go and do these things. But for different seasons in our life, it's like, well, get a Ship Shopper or get Instacart,
Mhm.
and order that. And
Yeah.
and it's not to say that we'll always do these things, or that it was rooted out of laziness or anything like that. It was just, we have a bigger problem that we're dealing with, and what are some simple ways that we can,
Mhm.
overcome? So,
Not
may
that kids are a problem. I just gotta
no,
like,
the
yeah, but the
postpartum
postpartum
depression
depression
was the
is,
problem. Yeah.
yes.
Yep. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
I'm referring to, the problem of postpartum depression and what those triggers are.
Yeah.
And it's like, let's eliminate as many as we can, again, proactively, and then just keep reevaluating. And, maybe those aren't your triggers, but there's other triggers that you have. And so it's just, again, that communication, sit down and just, you literally can do a brain dump on a piece of paper, of 20 things. And maybe you can pick off one or two and just try to eliminate them. And again, it doesn't have to be a financial thing. It doesn't have to be it can be anything. But
Mhm.
maybe pick the lowest hanging fruit first, the easiest stuff, or maybe pick the one big hard thing and try to eliminate that.
Yeah.
And so just try to break it down. And again, that's my very, engineering mechanical mind. And I'm not saying that is the way, but it might be a way for you to help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like as a spouse or even as a friend, knowing that maybe someone struggles like with, the house or whatever as
Yeah.
being a trigger, when you have a friend or a spouse who has just had a baby, pitch in,
Hmm.
like I could go over to a friend's house and be like, hey, like, can I wash your dishes for you?
Yeah.
Like that would be far more helpful than like, hey, I want to hold your cute baby, because
Right.
that's really for me. It's just,
Yep.
we're sharing these things because there are ways that you can help out postpartum moms,
Hmm.
whether it's when they have depression or just like have a new baby. Like
Yeah.
it's just a lot of hormones and a lot of stress and just a lot of transition.
Yep.
And so finding ways to be actually helpful, like, hey, I'm running to the store. Do you need something?
Hmm.
Can I get that for you while
Yeah.
you're out?
Yep.
Um, and just like actively seeking ways to help these moms as they're transitioning. And like I said, like it might be their first baby, it might be their 10th baby, but everyone in that postpartum phase really could use just a little extra support as
Hmm.
you're transitioning,
Yeah.
to a bigger family, because there are a lot of changes that happen. There's growing pains,
Yes.
and if there is postpartum depression, just being proactive and just being a friend or a
Hmm.
spouse to help. Like even you calling me, like he'll call me sometimes and just be like, do you need me to pick anything up on my
Yeah.
way home?
Yep.
And it's like, oh my goodness, I did not get to dinner tonight. Like if you can stop and pick something up or whatever, or
Yeah.
like I started making, spaghetti tonight and realized I just don't have whatever,
Hmm.
and so
Yeah.
it's just like you
And I'm
are
like, wait, you don't have spaghetti? And no, I'm kidding.
no, but you're being
Yeah.
available. And I guess that's actually like a really good way to just
Yes.
like wrap it up. Like be available. If you are a friend, if you are a spouse, be available. Spend some time learning to identify what postpartum depression looks like,
Hmm.
spend some time communicating, and then be proactive in trying to, I wouldn't say
Yeah.
eliminate it, but just like trying to be proactive in setting up yourself for success.
Yeah, establish some framework essentially, and also maybe have like a safe word or something, and it's like, hey, this is about ready to get bad. Either way, as a husband, you might start identifying some of these things, and believe me, some are more subtle than others. Sometimes they just smack you right in the
But you have to
face.
be really careful in how you
Yeah.
bring it up because be like, I'm not angry today.
Right, yeah, yeah, and
Uh,
then other times, it might be you who, say like, "All right, I need that help," or
yeah.
whatever.
Like,
Um,
here's how I'm struggling. Here's how you can help
yeah,
me. Yeah.
yeah, and again, as a husband, I really need to show a lot of grace
Mhm.
in the situation because maybe I had a rough day doing whatever I was doing, whether it was at work or anywhere else. And it's like, well, what about my needs? What about my this
Mhm.
or that? And just be patient, show a lot of grace, and truly just be encouraged by yeah, I always use the phrase this too shall pass, and it truly does. Nothing is permanent. You will hear me say this numerous times, but your successes aren't permanent, your failures aren't permanent. Nothing is permanent. So just really try not to get overwhelmed by the situation at hand and think, oh my goodness, I'm never going to have the marriage I used to have, or I'm
Mhm.
never going to have the spouse that I used to have, or things like that. That's I can confidently say that if you work together and you humble yourself and you try to pitch in, it will at least make the situation better. It,
Yeah.
it might be a long road and a long journey
Mhm.
to help overcome, but it will at least keep you on the same page and almost guaranteed get better over time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
You mentioned that long road, long journey, and I kind of want to share this too. Is when I was going through the postpartum depression, especially after our third with like that postpartum rage and
Mhm.
just like the intense anger that I was feeling. Like most people didn't even know I was going through that. I
No.
hid it really well, but behind closed doors, it was really bad.
Mhm.
Um, Habits can get laid during those
Mhm.
times. And here I am, I mean, she's now going to be turning 5. I am still working out of habits,
Mhm.
trying to like when you create a habit, your brain actually like reshapes. Like you
Mhm.
get new grooves in your brain and you kind of
Yep.
almost get stuck in these
Yeah. The
grooves.
power of habit. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like you have to work on new habits and so even when the postpartum depression is no longer there, you might have some lingering
Mhm.
habits
Yep.
that need to be reworked. And
Yep.
here I am 5 years in and I'm
Yep.
still working on some of
Yep.
those.
And the cycle of a habit is started by a trigger. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a clinical term,
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, it's
So
it's powerful. Yep.
yeah. So anyways, I hope that this was helpful to someone out there, that just being able to know that, first, you are not alone if you are going through postpartum depression. Secondly, if you are a spouse, I hope that this was encouraging to you to just be able to better support your spouse when
Yeah.
you're going through this. As a husband
Yep.
or whatever, you can better support your spouse
Yeah.
when going through this. As a friend, you maybe now have some ideas of
Yeah.
what your friend might be going through and how you can better support her
Yeah.
with that. So, we are simply sharing our stories in hopes that it can encourage you to take steps towards supporting one another.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep. Yeah. No, again, there's so many things that we, could share and, maybe dive in deeper on or share statistics about and things like that. But if you have specific questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Again, we aren't professionals here. We're just sharing some experiences that we've had, and we know that it can be just really a grind.
mhm.
And so, reach out to us. There's ways to contact us in the show notes or in the description below. Podcast at thisdevotedlife.com is our email address for this little venture. So
Yeah.
we'd love to hear from you, and whether we just respond directly or maybe create another podcast about this topic. We'd just love to help.
Yeah. So if there's ever anything else that you would like to hear a little more specific on, like he said, please reach out to us.
Yeah.
As we want to know what you want to hear about and how we can best serve you through this podcast.
Yeah, we listen
So
to each other all the time. So
we've already talked about all this stuff.
we might as well talk about things that you actually want to hear, and not just things that we want to talk about. So
Right. Yep.
yeah.
So I think that's a wrap. So be sure to seek God, love your spouse, hug your kids, and stay devoted. Thank you for tuning in to this Devoted Life podcast with James and Shanda. We appreciate your support in sharing biblical, uplifting truths with the world. If you found value in this episode, please leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us to improve the show, and we'd love to hear from you. Be sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. To learn more about how to live a life devoted to God and family, head over to thisdevotedlife.com. You can also follow me, Shanda, on Instagram at devoted_motherhood. Thank you again for listening, and we look forward to seeing you next time on This Devoted Life podcast.